So I commonly receive questions about terminology. What does this term mean? What does that term mean? And to compare the terms I use to terms I don't necessarily use frequently. And of course, this is perfectly okay. I understand the desire for understanding, for mental clarity, and so forth. But I also think it's important sometimes to point out that what I'm pointing to, no term adequately describes it. Not even close. So a term is like a pointer, but what it's pointing to is what really matters. So if you have 5 terms referring to the same thing, then there's really no reason to discuss which term is more important, less important, more or less accurate. What matters is that you're actually aware of what they're pointing to. And this is why I use sometimes contradictory terminology, or I point in different ways, or I try to come at realization from different angles. Sometimes through specific practices, sometimes through inquiry, and even sometimes pointing out the truth that there's really no procedure or process that's going to lead you back to your true nature because you've never left it. You never could leave it. So I do sort of vary the ways I point, even when I'm working one-on-one with somebody, because the ego is a pattern recognizer. The thought process will continue to look for patterns in descriptions, pointings, etc., so that it can continue to solidify its own paradigm of the way things are. The problem is that mechanism that's trying to solidify reality, trying to understand it, trying to keep it a certain way so that it knows what to depend on. That is actually a large part of what's causing suffering in the first place. So many of these pointings and even techniques such as self-inquiry are ultimately aiming to dismantle that tendency to always live out of a framework, to always live out of an understanding and an internal description of how life is, rather than seeing the uncomfortable truth that what you are is so completely absorbed in everything that there's really no personal self apart from life. There's nothing that can stand apart and decide how it wants things to be, or decide which map is the proper map, because there's only the territory. Maps are thoughts. Maps are like ghosts trying to cling to something they can't cling to, trying to cling to a world they can't actually directly perceive. So this major transition into the non-conceptual, into immediate experience, into unbinding, is such an important part of this entire endeavor. Until that happens, it's so easy to re-hypnotize ourselves back into the thought stream, back into an understanding of life or spirituality or awakening. The moment we understand it in an intellectual way, we are re-binding ourselves back into a conceptual experience to some degree. Understanding can be helpful after awakening as well, but even then, I would caution people to spend the vast majority of their time directly investigating their immediate experience in a thoughtless, wordless way. Whether it's the breath moving, whether it's body sensations spontaneously appearing, sound spontaneously appearing and disappearing, whether it's just the indescribable and interpenetrated flow of experience that is this moment, that needs no descriptions. That's where you should spend most of your time. conceptual understanding a small percentage of your time. Pointings are only as good as where they point. So if you find teachers or writings that effectively point you into the wordless, direct experience right now, then they're doing their work. But if you find yourself getting bound up into, well, is this right or is that right? Or do I have it or do I not have it? It's important to always recognize those are thoughts. Those are sort of like maps, even if they're confusing maps or contradictory maps. They're really symbolic. We're not interested in the symbols here. We're interested in what they represent. And what they represent is indescribable, unfathomably close, intimate, intertwined, so that close loses all meaning. Even intimate loses all meaning because there's no way to experience anything outside of this. There's no way to experience anything that is disconnected. There's no way to experience anything that could be lost in any way. There is only this. And it's kaleidoscopic in its splendor, in its variation. And it's deeply peaceful in its transience, its inability to hold any paradigm, any view, any frame of reference. What this is too real to hold on or to be held on to. It has too many degrees of freedom to be bound by any description, any way of seeing, any point of view. So enjoy the unbinding of this moment. Enjoy not having to label anything and yet immediately inheriting everything. This is freedom. This is peace. It's right here for you.